All right, everyone, we're starting off chapter 20 of the reproductive system by taking a look at the males first, as they're much more simple in relation to the complexities of the female system. So let's dive right in. The function of the reproductive system, regardless of gender, is to produce offspring. We're trying to make sure that we ensure the survival of our species, get our genetic code into the next generation. Specifically to males, however, we have to look at the parts that make up their system. That would include the testes or male gonads, the scrotum, the various ducts, various glands, and the external genitalia, the penis. When we look at the testes and scrotum, the scrotum is the sac of skin located between the thighs. It is meant to support and house the testes. It's also meant to maintain a relative temperature. In fact, a temperature of about 96 degrees. This is about 3 degrees less than that of body temperature. And this is very important because we are trying to get the production of viable sperm. Viable meaning healthy and able to produce offspring, mobile enough to make it through the male reproductive system and all the way through the female reproductive system. The testes are the primary sex organs. They're about 1.5 inches long to 1.5 inches wide, depending on the male. And the reason we call them the primary sex organ is they produce the half of offspring, sperm, and the male sex hormone, testosterone. When we look at the testes, they're divided internally into sections or lobes. Each of those lobes contains seminiferous tubules. Those seminiferous tubules are where spermatogenesis takes place. That's just a fancy way of saying sperm, genesis, production. So here's where we see the production of sperm. Among those tubules, we also see Sertoli cells. These produce inhibitor hormones when stimulated by testosterone. So once a male gets to puberty, we see these start to become active and we turn on the functions of spermatogenesis. Between the loops of those tubules, we also see interstitial cells. These interstitial cells are very important because where the seminiferous tubules produce sperm, the interstitial cells produce testosterone, and they do this when they're stimulated by yet another hormone, LH, or luteinizing hormone. The function of testosterone in males, as you can see in this diagram, there are quite a few, but it initiates the development of secondary sex characteristics. It also allows for the growth of the reproductive organs, the growth or the thickening of the larynx, which is why there's a difference between a male voice and a female voice, growth of facial and body hair, and lastly, an increase in protein synthesis, specifically as we talk about skeletal muscle. So ladies, this immediately is the reason why our male counterparts are better equipped to gain lean muscle mass more quickly and shed body tissue more quickly. It's unfortunate and unfair, but it's science. Now, one of these ducts or tubules that's very important is the epididymis. The epididymis is about a 20-inch long tube that gets coiled on the posterior surface of each testy. So if you look at that diagram, it kind of looks like a hook at the back of that testy egg-like structure. Here is where sperm completes their maturation. So once sperm is produced in the testy, it goes to the epididymis to complete its maturation or grow up. The reason being is this is the area where the flagella becomes functional and they become able to move or swim. Smooth muscle is what the epididymis is made up of, and because it's smooth, it's involuntary, and it's going to propel sperm into the ductus deferens, otherwise known as the vas deferens. The vas deferens extends from that epididymis into the abdominal cavity through the inguinal canals. The inguinal canal is simply an opening that allows the testes to descend during fetal development, and it closes usually after the testes descend. The vas deferens will loop over and down the posterior surface of a urinary bladder in order to join the other ejaculatory ducts. So it kind of has this nice theme park type of loop on it, as you can see in the diagram. This is also made of smooth muscle, which means, again, it's involuntary, and contractions happen through peristalsis during ejaculation. Peristalsis, as a reminder, those nice wave-like motions. There is a way to prevent things from moving in this way, and that would be a vasectomy. A vasectomy is a procedure where a small incision is made into the scrotum, and then the vas deferens is cut and cauterized, which means there is no pathway from the epididymis, where the sperm are mature, to then the posterior side of the bladder and therefore the urethra, so they would never exit the male body. This therefore causes sterilization of males, a form of contraception. Your ejaculatory ducts in males receive sperm from the vas deferens as well as secretions from the seminal vesicles. Both of these empty into the urethra, which is why the urethra serves dual functions in both the urinary as well as the reproductive system. As a reminder, like I said last time, they cannot take place at the same time. Not a challenge, just scientific fact. The three glands that make up the male reproductive system are your seminal vesicles, as we just mentioned, the prostate gland, and the bulbourethral gland. All of these secrete different liquid portions of semen, and all of them are alkaline in nature, meaning they're more basic. The reason they have to be basic is the female environment is very acidic in nature, so we have to even out that pH. So the female environment doesn't kill off all the male sperm, and therefore we would never get any offspring, and the reproductive system would therefore have no purpose. The seminal vesicles are posterior to the urinary bladder, as mentioned, and they're really important because this secretion is not only alkaline or basic, but it also contains fructose or sugar, which serves as an energy source or food for the sperm. Again, they're alkaline to enhance sperm motility. Next, we see the prostate gland. The prostate gland is a muscular gland below or inferior to the urinary bladder and therefore inferior to the seminal vesicle. When it contracts, it is what contributes to that really aggressive, explosive type of exit of semen from the male body. It surrounds the first inch of the urethra, and as the other glands, it's going to secrete an alkaline fluid to maintain sperm motility. The last of the three glands, the bulbourethral gland, so you don't have to say it all the time, this is also known as the Cowper's gland. It's located inferior to the prostate gland. Similar to the other two, it secretes an alkaline fluid. However, its fluid secretion will coat the urethra right before ejaculation. So this is what produces pre-ejaculate. This neutralizes the acidic environment formed when urine once passed through the male urethra during micturition. It also acts as a lubricant during intercourse and a cleaning agent for that urethra. We talked in slight depth about the male urethra last time. It changes in length depending on the size of the male, but it's really the last duct that semen would travel through in order to exit the male body. And it's located within the external genitalia, the penis. The penis has a distal end, which is scientifically known as the glans penis, not the head. And when it is when a male is first birthed into the world, it has a covering over it known as the prepuce or foreskin. That covering can be removed in a process known as circumcision, and usually this is decided without the consent of the infant male by mom and dad. This surgical removal of the foreskin typically has some type of religious backing or just preference on mom and dad. But males who are not circumcised versus males that are circumcised, you're just, as you can see in the diagram, looking at a different appearance. It's not technically better or worse one way or the other. However, males that are not circumcised need to do a really good job of cleaning the area underneath that foreskin regularly because they need to get rid of a substance that builds up, which is a formation of dead skin cells, sweat, other secretions known as schmegma. Don't know why it's called that. It's a dirty word for dirty buildup around the glans penis. Now, during sexual stimulation of the male, the penis will then form an erection. And because of this, or rather what creates this, is three masses of erectile tissue. That erectile tissue is made of smooth muscle, connective tissue, and blood sinuses, or nice areas that are meant to fill with blood. The sinus is large, irregular, and it's vascular in nature. So during stimulation, those arteries dilate and large quantities of blood fill the sinuses. Because of the filling of sinuses, expansion will cause the veins to compress and therefore blood to be retained in the penis. This is what causes an erection. Semen is the secretion from a mixture of the sperm and all of the glands. It has an average pH of about 7.4, so again, we're slightly more basic on the pH scale. About 2 to 4 milliliters of semen are expelled during each ejaculation, and each milliliter contains about 100 million sperm cells on average. In fact, if that number is below 20 million per milliliter, the man is considered to be sterile because a lot of sperm cells die in the very long journey to make their way to their end goal, the female gonad, or rather the egg. Men can suffer a relatively unique hernia, which is an inguinal hernia. As we saw earlier, testes form in the abdomen and then descend into the scrotum through this inguinal canal, and after that canal is meant to close. However, in some cases it does not. Therefore, the intestine have the opportunity to pass through that canal, unfortunately causing a hernia. Sometimes heavy lifting can cause a hernia. However, that's not the only cause. Normal daily strenuous activities can cause this. But good news is it can be repaired through surgery. Rectal exams. Rectal exams are very important to detect the early signs of prostate cancer. During this procedure, fingers are inserted into the rectum to feel for an enlarged prostate, and this is recommended for men over the age of 40. There's also a prostate-specific antigen test, which is a blood test used to detect proteins produced when prostate levels are elevated. Also recommended for men over the age of 40 if there is a history of prostate cancer in their family. I am linking a relatively funny video if you've ever watched Impractical Jokers, but you get to see a prostate exam. Not in depth. However, the doctor kind of talks you through the process. And last but not least, testicular self-examination. Testicular cancer is another something that men have to be vitally aware of because it's the most common form of cancer amongst men, ages 15 to 34. That's relatively young on the age scale. So during this test, males would feel for any changes or irregularities every month. And the way you would do this is you would gently roll each testicle between the thumb and fingers. You will find the epididymis. It's that rope-like structure attached to the back of each testy. That is not an abnormal lump. It's meant to be there. So if you find it, let go of it and move on. Instead, what a male would be feeling for is for masses, lumps, nodules along each of those testes. And it's important to note that those lumps are often painless unless you're applying a high level of pressure. You'll simply feel a mass. It's not going to be painful. It's also important for males to remember that one testicle is slightly larger than the other, and that might mean that in terms of appearance, the testy in that side of the scrotum hangs slightly lower or higher than the other. That is normal. Again, what you're trying to find is abnormalities along the actual surface of the testy, not what it looks like from the exterior. Hopefully this was a giggle-worthy type of lesson. Don't worry, the laughs aren't going to stop because we're going to dive into the female next time. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, that has been your nice tutorial, if you will, of the male reproductive system. Bye, guys.